General Eleanor Johnson was a hero, not just to her family but to her country. She had climbed the ranks of the military with hard work and smarts. Everyone who knew her, from the newest recruit to the highest-ranking officer, respected her. She wasn't just tough, she was fair. That's what made her a great leader. Eleanor loved her job. She loved the feeling of protecting people, of making a difference. She believed in justice and doing what was right, even when it was hard. She had seen a lot in her years of service, traveled to many places, and met all kinds of people. But no matter where she went, she always carried with her a strong sense of right and wrong. Her soldiers knew they could count on her. If someone was being treated unfairly, General Johnson would step in. She didn't care about rank or position, she cared about doing what was just. This reputation of bravery and fairness preceded her, a shining armor that announced her presence. Off-duty, Eleanor was a warm and loving person. She cherished spending time with her family, especially her mom, who lived a few hours away. She was planning a visit that very afternoon, looking forward to sharing stories and laughter. Little did she know this trip would soon test her values and her resolve like never before. The sun was shining as General Johnson drove down the highway. She was humming along to her favorite song on the radio, thinking about the delicious dinner her mom would make. The drive was peaceful and she felt relaxed, enjoying the scenery. She glanced at the fields of green and the fluffy white clouds in the blue sky. It was a perfect day for a visit. Suddenly, she saw flashing lights in her rearview mirror. A police car was signaling her to pull over. General Johnson signaled, carefully steered her car to the side of the road, and parked. She wondered what she had done wrong. She knew she hadn't been speeding. Maybe there was something wrong with her car. She took a deep breath, turned off the engine, and waited patiently for the officer to approach. As she waited, she reviewed in her mind the correct procedures for interacting with law enforcement. Stay calm, be polite, and answer their questions honestly. 2 officers got out of the car. One was tall and burly, the other shorter and wiry. They walked slowly toward her car, their faces grim. General Johnson lowered her window and prepared to hear what they had to say, a knot of unease forming in her stomach. This peaceful drive had just taken a very unsettling turn. Officer Miller, the taller of the two, approached the car first. His face was set in a scowl. Officer Davis hung back a little, but his eyes held a similar hardness. They already seemed to have decided something about General Johnson before she even had a chance to speak. Back at the police station earlier that day, Miller and Davis had been joking around. "Another day, another dollar," Miller had said, leaning back in his chair. "And another chance to clean up this town," Davis added with a smirk. Their conversation took a turn when they started talking about the types of people they usually pulled over in this part of the highway. Miller had a reputation for being quick to judge, and Davis often followed his lead. They often made assumptions based on a person's appearance or the kind of car they drove. They both harbored deep-seated prejudices that clouded their judgment and made them see the world in a very unfair way. As Miller reached General Johnson's window, he already had a story in his head, one built on stereotypes and biases. He didn't see a decorated general. He saw someone he had already decided was trouble. This prejudiced lens would color everything that followed, setting in motion a chain of events that would change their lives forever. "License and registration," Officer Miller barked, barely making eye contact. His tone was sharp and accusatory, as if she had already committed a crime. General Johnson calmly reached for her documents, her movements slow and deliberate. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Miller asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. General Johnson replied politely, "No, officer, I don't. I believe I was driving within the speed limit." Miller scoffed. "Yeah, right? Your taillight is out." General Johnson frowned. "That's strange, officer. I just had the car serviced last week and they checked all the lights." She handed him her license and registration. Davis, who had been silent until now, chimed in, probably just saying that. "These things always happen." His comment was unnecessary and rude. As Miller examined the documents, he continued to make snide remarks. "Nice car," he said, his tone suggesting he didn't believe she deserved it. "Probably can't afford the upkeep." General Johnson remained calm, though she felt a growing anger at their disrespectful behavior. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong, and their flimsy excuse for pulling her over, combined with their rude comments, felt unfair and targeted. The visit to her mom was quickly turning into a nightmare. "Officer," General Johnson said, maintaining her composure, "is there anything else? I'd really like to get going. I have a long drive ahead of me." Miller ignored her request. Step out of the car, he commanded, his voice rising. Officer, with all due respect, General Johnson replied, I haven't done anything wrong. Can you please explain why you're asking me to step out of the car? Davis stepped forward, his hand resting on his holster. Don't give us a hard time. Just do what you're told. I am not giving you a hard time, General Johnson said, her voice firm but controlled. I am simply asking for clarification. I know my rights. Miller's face turned red. I don't like your attitude. Now get out of the car. He reached for the door handle. General Johnson sighed inwardly. She could see that reasoning with them was pointless. Their minds were made up. Despite her calm demeanor and clear attempts to understand the situation, they were determined to escalate it. The situation was spiraling out of control, fueled by their prejudice and unwillingness to listen. She knew this wasn't about a taillight anymore. Miller yanked open the car door and reached for General Johnson's arm. You're resisting arrest, he shouted, even though she hadn't physically resisted at all. I am not resisting, General Johnson stated firmly, but her heart pounded in her chest. She knew this was wrong, terribly wrong. She reached into her purse and pulled out her military ID. I am a general in the United States Army, she said, holding up the ID for them to see. This is a mistake. Miller glanced at the ID, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but quickly dismissed it. I don't care who you are, he said, his voice regaining its harshness. You're going downtown. Davis moved quickly, grabbing General Johnson's other arm. Despite her protests and the clear evidence of her military rank, they forced her out of the car and roughly placed her hands behind her back. The cold metal of the handcuffs snapped shut around her wrists. Humiliation washed over General Johnson. The injustice of the situation was staggering. Here she was, a decorated officer who had dedicated her life to serving her country, being treated like a common criminal. The officers ignored her pleas, their prejudice blinding them to the truth. The click of the handcuffs echoed in the air, a stark symbol of their abuse of power. The handcuffs bit into General Johnson's wrists, a constant reminder of the injustice she was facing. She stood tall, despite the humiliation that threatened to overwhelm her. Anger simmered beneath her calm exterior, a controlled burn fueled by years of fighting for what was right. She knew she couldn't let this break her. She took a deep breath, focusing on maintaining her composure. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her upset. She would handle this with the same strength and determination she had shown on countless battlefields. I need to make a phone call, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. She didn't raise her voice or make a demand. She simply stated a fact. Miller smirked. Oh, yeah? Who are you going to call? The president. Perhaps, General Johnson replied, her eyes meeting Miller's with unwavering resolve. She wouldn't explain herself or justify her request. She knew exactly who she needed to call and what she needed to say. The wheels of justice were about to turn, and these officers had no idea what was coming. The power they thought they held was about to be challenged. Miller, still smirking, pulled out General Johnson's phone from her purse and handed it to her, clearly believing she was bluffing. Go ahead, he said. Call whoever you want. General Johnson dialed a number from memory, a direct line to the Pentagon. The phone rang only twice before it was answered. General Thompson's office, a crisp voice said. This is General Eleanor Johnson, she said, her voice calm and clear. I need to speak with General Thompson immediately. It's a matter of urgent importance. There was a brief pause, and then General Thompson's voice boomed over the line. Eleanor? What's going on? General Johnson took a deep breath and quickly explained the situation, describing the traffic stop, the officer's behavior, and the fact that she was currently handcuffed despite presenting her military ID. General Thompson was silent for a moment, then exploded. What? You're telling me these local cops have handcuffed a general of the United States Army? This is outrageous. I'm going to get to the bottom of this right now. His voice was filled with disbelief and fury. General Johnson knew that from that moment on, things would never be the same for Officers Miller and Davis. As General Thompson's booming voice echoed from the phone, Officer Miller and Officer Davis exchanged nervous glances. They hadn't expected her to actually call the Pentagon, let alone get through to someone so high-ranking. Miller's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of growing unease. Davis, who had been leaning against the police car, straightened up and nervously adjusted his belt. They strained to hear General Johnson's side of the conversation, piecing together enough to understand the gravity of their mistake. Handcuffed, military ID, General Thompson. The words floated on the air, each one a hammer blow to their confidence. Miller's face paled. He whispered to Davis, "Did you hear that? She's a general." Davis swallowed hard. "We're in trouble," he muttered. "Big trouble." The bravado they had displayed earlier evaporated, replaced by a dawning realization of the consequences of their actions. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. They were no longer in control. The confident, almost arrogant, police officers were now visibly shaken, their careers hanging precariously in the balance with every word General Thompson spoke on the other end of the line. The smirk had been wiped clean off Miller's face. General Thompson didn't waste any time. The moment he hung up the phone, he set the wheels in motion. He contacted the Secretary of Defense, who was equally appalled by the situation. Within minutes, the order was given, a full and immediate investigation into the incident. The Pentagon's investigation team was dispatched. They were the best of the best, experienced in uncovering the truth, no matter how well hidden. They contacted the local police department, informing them of the investigation and demanding full cooperation. They also contacted the local district attorney, ensuring that the legal aspects of the case would be thoroughly examined. The investigation focused on several key areas: the validity of the traffic stop, the officer's conduct during the stop, and any evidence of bias or discrimination. They would interview General Johnson, Officers Miller and Davis, and any other witnesses who might have information about the incident. The Pentagon took this matter extremely seriously. An attack on one of their own was an attack on the entire military. They were determined to uncover the truth and ensure that those responsible were held accountable for their actions. The investigation had begun, and it was going to be thorough and relentless. Miller and Davis's panic was justified. The Pentagon's investigation team dug deep. They reviewed police records, interviewed citizens, and even looked at the officers' social media accounts. What they found was disturbing. Officer Miller had a history of complaints filed against him, mostly by people of color, alleging harassment and discriminatory behavior. Many of these complaints had been dismissed or ignored by the police department's Internal Affairs Division. Officer Davis, while not having as many formal complaints, had a clear pattern of following Miller's lead, often participating in or condoning his discriminatory actions. Their social media posts revealed prejudiced attitudes and a clear bias against certain groups of people. The investigation also uncovered evidence that the taillight on General Johnson's car was, in fact, working perfectly. The traffic stop was based on a lie, a pretext to harass and intimidate her. The evidence was damning. Miller and Davis's history of discriminatory behavior was clear, and their actions against General Johnson were not an isolated incident. The Pentagon's investigation had exposed a deep-seated problem within the local police department, a problem that needed to be addressed immediately. The careers of Miller and Davis were looking increasingly bleak. As the details of the Pentagon's investigation began to leak to the press, the story exploded. News outlets across the country picked up the story of the black general wrongly handcuffed by racist cops. People were outraged. The community where the incident occurred was particularly incensed. They had long suspected that officers Miller and Davis were engaging in discriminatory practices, and now their suspicions were confirmed. Activists organized protests outside the police station demanding justice for General Johnson and an end to racial profiling. The protests grew larger each day, attracting people from all walks of life. They carried signs that read "Justice for General Johnson," "End Police Brutality," and "Black Lives Matter." They chanted slogans demanding the officers' firing and calling for police reform. Social media was ablaze with anger and condemnation. People shared the story widely, using hashtags like #JusticeForGeneralJohnson and #RacistCops. Celebrities and influencers weighed in, adding their voices to the chorus of outrage. The pressure on the police department and the local government was immense. They could no longer ignore the issue. The community was demanding action, and they were determined to get it. The small town was now at the center of a national debate about race, justice, and police accountability. Faced with mounting pressure from the community, the media, and the Pentagon, the local police chief had no choice but to act. He announced that officers Miller and Davis were immediately suspended from their duties, pending the outcome of the investigations. The suspension was met with mixed reactions. Some felt it was a step in the right direction, but not enough. They demanded that the officers be fired and charged with criminal offenses. Others, including the officers' union, argued that they were being unfairly targeted and that they deserved a fair hearing. For Miller and Davis, the suspension was a devastating blow. They were stripped of their badges, their guns, and their authority. They were no longer police officers, at least for the time being. They faced the prospect of losing their jobs, their reputations, and even their freedom. The suspension also sent a message to other officers in the department. It showed that discriminatory behavior would not be tolerated and that there would be consequences for abusing their power. It was a first step towards rebuilding trust between the police and the community, but there was still a long way to go. The protests continued, fueled by a desire for lasting change. After days of silence, General Johnson decided to speak out. She held a press conference, not to seek revenge, but to advocate for change. She stood tall and spoke with the same strength and clarity that had defined her military career. "What happened to me was wrong," she began, her voice calm but firm. "But this is not just about me. This is about all the people who were treated unfairly because of the color of their skin." She emphasized the need for police reform, calling for better training, increased accountability, and an end to racial profiling. She spoke about the importance of equality and justice for all, regardless of race or background. "We need to create a system where everyone is treated with respect and dignity," she said. "Where everyone has the same opportunities and where no one is judged based on prejudice." Her words resonated deeply with people across the country. They saw her not as a victim, but as a leader, a symbol of hope and change. Her speech inspired renewed calls for police reform and a renewed commitment to fighting for equality. The movement for justice had found its voice, and that voice was General Eleanor Johnson. She was now a beacon. The investigations into Officers Miller and Davis continued, both internally by the police department and externally by the Pentagon. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The police department's Internal Affairs Division recommended that both officers be fired for violating department policies and engaging in discriminatory behavior. The police chief, after reviewing the evidence, agreed with the recommendation. The officers' union fought to protect their jobs, arguing that they were being unfairly targeted and that their actions were being misinterpreted. They claimed that Miller and Davis were simply doing their jobs and that they had no intention of discriminating against anyone. However, the evidence was too strong to ignore. The past complaints, the biased social media posts, the false pretext for the traffic stop all pointed to a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior. Ultimately, the decision came down to the police chief. He weighed the evidence, considered the community's concerns, and listened to the arguments from both sides. In the end, he made the difficult but necessary decision. Officers Miller and Davis were terminated from their positions. Their careers were ruined, their reputations tarnished, and their futures uncertain. They had paid a heavy price for their prejudice and abuse of power. In the wake of the scandal, the police department recognized the urgent need for change. The police chief, determined to rebuild trust with the community, announced a series of new initiatives aimed at addressing racial bias and promoting equality. One of the most significant changes was the implementation of comprehensive training programs for all officers. These programs focused on topics such as cultural sensitivity, de-escalation techniques, and implicit bias. Experts from diverse backgrounds were brought in to lead the training sessions and share their perspectives. The training programs also included community engagement activities, where officers had the opportunity to interact with residents and learn about their concerns. The goal was to foster better relationships between the police and the community and to create a more inclusive and equitable environment. The police department also established a citizen review board, giving community members a greater role in overseeing police conduct and holding officers accountable for their actions. The Citizen Review Board had the power to investigate complaints, review police policies, and make recommendations for improvements. These changes were seen as a positive step forward, but many recognized that there was still much work to be done. The police department was committed to creating a culture of respect, fairness, and equality, but it would take time and effort to fully achieve the goal. The seeds of change had been planted. Despite the humiliation and anger she had experienced, General Johnson refused to be defined by the incident. She returned to her military duties, more determined than ever to serve her country and fight for what was right. She became a powerful voice for justice, speaking out against discrimination and advocating for equality at every opportunity. She used her platform to share her story and to inspire others to stand up for what they believed in. General Johnson visited schools and community centers, talking to young people about the importance of respect, tolerance, and understanding. She encouraged them to challenge injustice and to work towards a more inclusive and equitable world. She also worked with law enforcement agencies, sharing her experiences and offering her insights on how to improve police-community relations. She emphasized the need for officers to treat all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their race or background. General Johnson became a symbol of resilience, a shining example of how to turn adversity into opportunity. She showed the world that even in the face of injustice, it is possible to remain strong, to advocate for change, and to make a positive difference in the world. Her commitment to service continued. The story of General Eleanor Johnson serves as a powerful reminder that even in the face of injustice, hope can prevail. It shows that one person armed with courage and determination can make a difference in the world. It also underscores the importance of holding people accountable for their actions. Officers Miller and Davis were held responsible for their discriminatory behavior, and their careers were ruined as a result. This sent a clear message that prejudice and abuse of power will not be tolerated. While the incident was painful and traumatic for General Johnson, it ultimately led to positive change. The police department implemented new training programs, the community became more engaged, and a national conversation about race and justice was sparked. The fight for equality is far from over, but the story of General Johnson offers a glimmer of hope. It shows that progress is possible, that change can happen, and that even in the darkest of times, the light of justice can shine through. By standing together, by speaking out against injustice, and by holding people accountable for their actions, we can create a more fair and equitable world for all. The future is bright if we choose to make it so.